The spotlight burned hotter than I remembered. I stood at the edge of the stage, my heart steady, but my fingers trembling. Watching the man I'd trusted most in the world, my brother, standing at the podium, smiling as he took credit for my film. "None of this," Liam said, flashing that rehearsed grin, "would have been possible without the incredible team at Morgan Creative Studios. And, of course, the concept I've been developing for years." My stomach twisted. The concept? His? The crowd roared. Flashbulbs burst like fireworks. My throat burned with disbelief, but I swallowed it down. I'd spent 2 years, 2 sleepless, coffee-fueled years, developing that documentary pitch, writing every word, framing every scene, building a story raw enough to make people cry. But there he was, basking in applause, holding the award with my idea's name engraved on it. And I was standing in the second row, anonymous, invisible. He had even invited me to the ceremony. "Come, Ava," he'd said. "It'll be good for you to see how the industry really works." I didn't know whether to laugh or vomit. The cameras panned across the audience, searching for reactions. My face was calm. I made sure of it. I clapped, slow and deliberate, even smiled once. That was the moment I realized how powerful composure could be. Rage makes you predictable. Calm makes you dangerous. He didn't know that I had already seen the emails, the ones he thought he deleted, where he replaced my name with his, line by line, in the production credits. The NDA he'd drafted, carefully erasing my authorship. The fake timeline he'd built to prove he had started the project before me. And he didn't know I'd been recording every meeting since February, every producer call, every client briefing, every single lie. I had learned, slowly, that my brother's genius wasn't in creativity, it was in manipulation. He could convince people to remember things that never happened, but I wasn't the same sister he used to dismiss at the dinner table. The one who used to cry when he called my ideas cute. Tonight, as the applause thundered, I didn't feel small. I felt still. Stillness can look like weakness until you understand it's where strategy is born. When the host invited him to say a few closing words, he turned slightly toward my row, searching for me in the crowd, and I saw it, the flicker of victory in his eyes. That look he'd given me since childhood whenever he won. I smiled back, soft, controlled, just enough to unsettle him. He looked away first. After the ceremony, the lobby glimmered with crystal chandeliers and expensive laughter. Everyone wanted to talk to him. Publicists, journalists, fake friends. I waited at the bar, ordered sparkling water, and watched. From a distance, he was magnetic. Up close, he was a ghost in a suit. He had built a life on borrowed brilliance, mine included. "Congratulations, Miss Morgan," a voice said beside me. I turned. It was one of the Netflix acquisitions executives, the one who'd reached out a month ago under NDA. She smiled knowingly. "Looks like the pitch you sent us had a familiar title tonight." I met her gaze. "It did," I said. "Still interested in following through?" "Oh," I replied, my lips curling faintly. "I've never been more interested." She nodded. "Good, then we'll wait for your call." I raised my glass to her and took a sip. My reflection wavered in the rim. Not a victim's face, but something colder, sharper. Someone learning the art of quiet vengeance. The afterparty buzzed with energy. Liam floated through it like he owned the world. He introduced me to people as my little sister. She helps out sometimes. That line earned a few polite laughs. I didn't correct him. I just studied the faces, memorizing who believed him, who looked unsure, who avoided my eyes. "Still trying to find your big break, huh?" One of his producer friends said to me, smiling the kind of smile that men reserve for women they underestimate. "Something like that," I answered. "But you know what they say. The quiet ones usually surprise you." He chuckled. I'll drink to that. When I stepped outside later, the night air felt different, colder but cleaner. I could hear the hum of the city, the taxis, the chatter, the sound of someone's laughter echoing from the red carpet. I pulled my coat tighter and walked away, heels striking rhythmically against the marble steps. Liam's laughter trailed behind me through the glass doors. I didn't turn around. He thought tonight was the end of my story, but it was just the opening scene. The city lights blurred in the taxi window like streaks of melted gold. My reflection looked unfamiliar. Steady eyes, unflinching jawline, the kind of face that no longer needed approval. I leaned back and let the hum of traffic wash over me. The seat smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and some driver's old cologne. My phone buzzed nonstop, texts from acquaintances, old classmates, and 2 journalists who had already tagged me in photos beside my brother. Family of the visionary, one caption read. Another said, talent clearly runs in the Morgans. I laughed, quiet, humorless. If they only knew. When I reached my apartment, the silence was sharp. My awards from film school lined one shelf, gathering dust. None of them had ever meant much to him. He used to joke that trophies were participation prizes for people without legacy. I kicked off my heels and sat on the couch, phone in hand. The live recording of Liam's acceptance speech had already been uploaded. The comment section was a shrine to his charm. Brilliant mind, a creative genius, the future of storytelling. But then, buried among them, one caught my eye. Wait, wasn't this Ava Morgan's project originally? I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Truth always starts as a whisper. The air felt heavy with memory. I opened the old folder on my laptop, the one I'd labeled Archive 01, and scrolled through months of saved audio files. Click. Recording started, February 9th. Liam's voice filled the room. Smooth, confident, manipulative. If we pitch it under my name first, you'll get your credit later, Ava. You're too new. Let me handle the front-facing stuff. I paused the playback. I remembered that day. The snow outside his office window, the cup of black coffee he handed me, the way he said later, like it was a promise. I pressed play again. Besides, you wouldn't even know who to contact at the network. Just let me speak for both of us. The recording ended with my voice agreeing softly. I winced. I sounded small, eager. That version of me no longer existed. I spent the next few hours organizing every file, time-stamping every lie. My desk lamp cast long shadows across the room as I worked. The deeper I went, the more I realized how systematic he'd been, revising pitch decks, backdating emails, forging concept drafts. It wasn't impulsive. It was architecture. Betrayal as design. By 3 a.m., I had a 214-page document compiled, evidence of intellectual theft, professional deceit, and clear motive. I saved it twice, printed a hard copy, and locked it in a fireproof box. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since noon. I grabbed a leftover salad from the fridge and sat by the window. The city still pulsed below, constant, restless, indifferent. Across the street, a giant billboard flickered with a Netflix logo promoting their next original documentary. It was ironic. I had dreamed of seeing my work there someday. I still would, just not the way he expected. My phone vibrated again, a new message from Liam. Liam, big night, huh? You looked pissed. Don't be dramatic. It's business. I stared at the screen for a full minute before replying. Ava, congratulations. You deserve every bit of the spotlight. He replied almost instantly. Liam, that's my girl. Don't worry, I'll find something for you to assist on next quarter. Assist. The word stabbed more than it should have. I didn't respond. I set my phone face down and closed my eyes. The silence pressed in. For the first time that night, I allowed myself to feel the sting, not of failure, but of insult. Years of it. But emotion is a dangerous currency. I could afford only a little. I poured a glass of water, opened a blank document, and typed one sentence at the top: reclamation plan. Beneath it, I listed 3 phases: exposure, reversal, redemption. Each would unfold without confrontation, without anger, only precision. Phase 1 began with ownership. I logged into the Writers Guild portal and filed a delayed registration for my original script under my name. It took minutes. The confirmation email pinged in my inbox like a gunshot muffled by distance. Next, I drafted a message to the Netflix executive, the same woman from the ceremony. Subject: Morgan Creative Original Authorship Confirmation. Hi, Elena. As discussed, I'm ready to proceed. I'll provide full documentation tomorrow regarding the original source material and project history. Let's finalize the timeline under my production label as planned. I hit send. Outside, dawn began to smear the sky with pale blue. I watched it spread, slow and deliberate. That's the thing about revenge. It doesn't always start with fire. Sometimes it begins with light. I thought about Liam then, sleeping soundly, probably dreaming of interviews and talk shows, unaware that every victory he'd stolen had just started to dissolve beneath him. The irony was almost beautiful. The same ambition he weaponized against me would soon expose him. When the first rays hit the glass, I smiled faintly. Not triumph, just relief. Tomorrow, I'd meet with the Netflix team in person. I'd show them the recordings, the drafts, the metadata. The law was on my side. The art was mine. And when the trailer finally dropped, the title card would carry only one name: mine. I turned off the lamp and whispered to the empty room. You told me I'd never be famous, Liam. Let's see how long your name lasts when the truth starts trending. The words hung there, soft but electric, echoing like a promise. Morning sunlight cut across my living room floor like sharp glass. I barely slept, but exhaustion didn't matter. The kind of focus that comes with quiet fury kept me upright. By 8:30 a.m., I was dressed. Black blazer, white blouse, hair slicked into a bun tight enough to hide the trembling I still felt inside. The mirror reflected a version of me that looked calm, professional, unreadable. It was a costume I'd perfected over the years. The good sister, the supportive creative, the woman who smiled at panels while her work was being dissected by men who had never stayed up editing until dawn. I took a final look at my notes, closed my laptop, and slipped the flash drive into my bag. The drive was silver, no label, but inside it held every truth I'd buried: recordings, contracts, timestamps, metadata logs, years of quiet proof. It was strange how justice could fit into something so small. By 10 a.m., I was standing outside the Netflix headquarters in Los Angeles. The building shimmered in the morning sun, glass panels reflecting blue sky like armor. The receptionist smiled politely as I checked in. Ava Morgan, they're expecting you. The conference room smelled faintly of citrus and ambition. There were 3 people waiting: Elena, the acquisitions executive from last night, Jason, the legal consultant, and Maya, a junior creative producer who looked barely old enough to rent a car, but had the alert eyes of someone who'd seen careers rise and burn overnight. Good to see you again, Ava, Elena said, standing to shake my hand. Quite an event yesterday. You could say that, I replied, taking a seat. Jason leaned forward, polite but firm. You mentioned you wanted to discuss authorship verification. I nodded and opened my laptop, the screen glowing like a stage light. I'd rather show than tell. I clicked the first audio file. Liam's voice filled the room. If we pitch it under my name first, you'll get your credit later, Ava. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. I didn't flinch. I played the second file, his meeting with the legal rep, where he had explicitly said, "We'll just omit her name for now. It complicates the paperwork." When I stopped the playback, Jason cleared his throat. That's very clear evidence of misrepresentation. Elena's expression didn't change. But I saw the flicker of vindication in her eyes. And you have timestamps for all this? Yes, I said, sliding over the printed documentation. Each file has embedded metadata from original creation dates. I also have screenshots of the project drafts, dated 6 months before Liam's supposed initial submission. Maya leaned in, fascinated. He really tried to erase you. He's had practice, I said softly. Family dinners were good rehearsal. They chuckled, the first sound of levity in the room. Elena straightened, tapping her pen. Ava, Netflix takes intellectual ownership very seriously. If this project originated with you, we're prepared to renegotiate under your name. My chest tightened, not from nerves, but from the surrealness of hearing justice spoken aloud. I'm not looking for revenge, I said, which was half a lie. I just want the story told right. My story. Our agreement was supposed to be equal. He made sure it wasn't. Elena nodded slowly. We'll begin internal review immediately. You'll need to provide us with the original working files, drafts, visuals, emails, and I'll coordinate legal from here. Thank you, I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. As the meeting wrapped, Maya walked me to the elevator. You handled that like a pro, she said. I've had years of training in silence, I replied. She smiled. You know, when this trailer drops, people are going to see the name Ava Morgan and wonder where you came from. It's poetic. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside and said quietly, it's not poetry yet. It's still the setup. Outside, the city buzzed with indifferent life. I grabbed a coffee from the cafe across the street and sat by the window, letting the noise fade into a hum. My phone buzzed. It was a new post from Liam's verified account, a clip of his acceptance speech, captioned, "Hard work pays off. Passion beats talent. Always." The irony almost made me laugh. Passion beats talent? No. Manipulation beats naivete. But not forever. I scrolled through the comments. Thousands of likes. He was riding high. Interviews. Morning talk shows. Magazine features. Every article called him visionary, storytelling prodigy, the brother of a fellow creative. My name always came second, a shadow in his narrative. I saved every post, every timestamp. Evidence, yes, but also motivation. Then, unexpectedly, a notification popped up. Direct message from @Netflix Originals PR. Ava, this is off record. We're reviewing authorship status. Please refrain from public statements until we finalize documentation. You will be contacted shortly. I read it twice. That wasn't just internal procedure, that was protection. They were insulating me from potential backlash before shifting credit. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to breathe. I thought back to our childhood, to the nights we used to stay up late, watching movies, whispering about the future. Liam would always say, "One day, I'll be the name on the screen." And I'd reply, "Then I'll be the one who writes it." I used to think that was sibling banter. Now I understood it had always been prophecy, but not in the way he imagined. The difference between us was never talent. It was patience. He rushed for the spotlight. I learned to build it. My phone rang. "Mom," I hesitated before answering. "Ava," she said, voice tight. "I saw the news last night. You were there? Why didn't you tell me he was using your idea? Because you wouldn't have believed me. That's not fair." "It's true." A pause stretched. "You're still his sister. Don't destroy him." I stared out the window at the people walking by, headphones in, lives moving forward. He destroyed himself. I'm just turning the lights on. She sighed. "You always had to have the last word." "No," I said quietly. He just never let me finish the first. When the call ended, I sat for a long time, tracing the rim of my coffee cup with my finger. The city felt lighter now, like the weight had started to shift. That evening, I received an encrypted email from Elena. Subject: Preliminary Authorship Confirmation. Morgan Creative. Ava, our legal team has verified the creation metadata and communications history you provided. The project has been officially attributed to you as original creator. Next steps: renegotiation and rebranding discussions. Please keep this confidential until public announcement. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. There it was, Quiet, official, irreversible. And yet, I didn't smile. It wasn't joy. It was something deeper. The calm that comes before revelation. The world hadn't seen the truth yet, but it was coming. And when it did, no speech, no award, no charm could save him. The trailer hadn't dropped yet, but I could already hear the sound of the first domino falling. Fame, I discovered, has a sound. It's not applause or screening fans. It's the low, constant buzz of people saying your name when you're not in the room. By the end of the week, that buzz surrounded Liam like static. He was everywhere. Morning shows, podcasts, online interviews. His face filled thumbnails across YouTube, framed by headlines that used words like trailblazer and visionary. But under all that noise, something quieter was beginning to stir. A hum of doubt. It started with a single article, a small blog post from an industry writer, known for digging into creative credits. The title read, "The Morgan Mystery, Who Really Created Framed Truths." I found it by accident while scrolling through Twitter one morning. The piece was short but sharp, noting inconsistencies between early project files and the timeline Liam had presented publicly. It mentioned my name, just once, but that was enough. The comment section erupted with speculation. Wasn't Ava part of the original pitch? Why isn't she in any of the interviews? I remember her talking about this idea last year. I didn't comment, didn't repost, didn't even like the article. Silence was my currency now. Every time I withheld a reaction, I let curiosity do my work for me. Meanwhile, Netflix's internal review moved faster than expected. Elena updated me daily, each message careful, clinical, and quietly thrilling. The rebranding paperwork was almost complete, and the marketing team was already discussing trailer rollout under my official credit. Still, I said nothing publicly. The trick to revenge, I'd learned, wasn't shouting louder. It was letting the silence grow so wide that your enemies started filling it with their own panic. By the second week, I saw it in his eyes. Liam called me on a Thursday evening. I was editing a short film project, something personal, small. When his name flashed on my screen, I almost ignored it. But then curiosity won. "Hey," I said flatly. "Ava," he began too casually. "We need to talk." "About what? You've been busy." The word came out with that false calm people use when they're already angry. "I'm always busy," I said. "Don't do that thing where you pretend you don't know what I'm talking about." I muted the TV in the background. "Then say it," he exhaled sharply. "People are asking questions. Some stupid blog is claiming you wrote framed truths. You didn't, right?" I let a pause stretch, just long enough for his confidence to falter. "That's an interesting question to ask your sister." "Ava, come on. You know how this looks. If you start spreading things like that—" "Spreading?" I interrupted. "I haven't said a word." His silence was almost satisfying. "I just don't want this to get ugly," he said finally. "Then maybe you shouldn't have built it on lies." The line went dead silent. I could almost hear his mind working, calculating, rewiring, convincing itself this was still under control. "Look," he said after a long pause, "we're family. If you wanted credit, we could have discussed it. You know how the industry works. My name gets attention. That helps both of us." I smiled bitterly, even though he couldn't see it. "You mean your name gets paid?" "Don't be dramatic." "I'm not. I'm patient." He hesitated again. "You know, Netflix isn't stupid. They know who they're working with." "Oh, I know," I said softly. "They're very smart people." He started to reply, then stopped. The silence on the other end stretched like a wire about to snap. Finally, he muttered, "You're not making sense," and hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying his voice, the unease buried under forced charm. It wasn't fear yet, but it was close. The kind of confusion that comes before fear. By morning, the industry gossip had escalated. Another article appeared, this time from FilmScope Weekly, a mid-tier publication, but one that professionals read. The headline was bolder. Behind Framed Truths, did Netflix's next hit have a ghostwriter? It included a side-by-side comparison of the early pitch document and the final product. My name appeared 3 times, his not at all. The comments turned vicious fast. So he stole it from his sister? If that's true, it's career-ending. I've worked with Ava Morgan. She's brilliant. This tracks. My phone started buzzing again, this time with messages from former collaborators, classmates, even an old professor. Most said the same thing. Finally, at noon, Netflix made its first subtle move. They pulled down all the teaser clips featuring Liam's exclusive behind-the-scenes commentary. His face disappeared from their official YouTube playlist within hours. I didn't need confirmation. That was the beginning of the transition. I spent the afternoon sitting by my window, again, sipping tea instead of coffee this time. The sky outside was gray, heavy with rain, but I didn't mind. It matched the mood, cleansing, patient, inevitable. When my phone rang again that evening, I knew who it was before I looked. This time, I let it ring out. Then the voicemail icon appeared. I pressed play. Ava, we need to talk. Please, you're making a mistake. These people don't care about you. They'll use you and drop you. Just call me back, okay? We can fix this before it goes too far. The irony of him saying we can fix this almost made me laugh. I didn't call him back. Instead, I opened the project folder on my laptop. The newest email from Elena was marked confidential. It contained the final approval for the updated marketing assets. Attached was the new key art, a black background, bold red title letters, and beneath them, in simple font, created by Ava Morgan. I stared at it for a long time. I should have felt triumph. Instead, I felt quiet. There's something sobering about watching your dreams finally arrive, not as gifts, but as reparations. Later that night, Liam posted a new tweet. Funny how people love to rewrite history, but truth always wins. Hashtag stay tuned. Thousands of likes poured in. Sympathy, outrage, defensiveness. The public wasn't sure what to believe anymore. I shut my laptop and whispered into the dim light. Yes, Liam, truth does win. You just picked the wrong side of it. When I finally went to bed, the rain had started. It drummed against my window softly, like applause from the universe. Not loud, but steady. And as I drifted to sleep, I wasn't thinking about the scandal or the fame, or even the trailer that would soon carry my name. I was thinking about the moment he would realize that the very story he stole would become the story that destroyed him. Because poetic justice isn't written, it's lived. The day the trailer dropped felt like an ordinary Tuesday. Clouds hung low over Los Angeles, a pale, washed-out gray that made the city look like it was holding its breath. I woke before dawn, restless. The air in my apartment was cool, humming with the faint buzz of my refrigerator and the muted rhythm of passing cars below. The clock read 5:47 a.m., too early for most people, too late for sleep. I brewed coffee and sat by the window, watching the sky lighten. My phone vibrated once, then again. Texts, notifications, the quiet chaos of a world waking up. Then came the email subject line that made my pulse stutter. Framed Truths, official trailer now live. It was from Netflix's marketing division. For a second, I didn't open it. My fingers hovered over the screen, trembling despite everything I practiced about composure. I exhaled slowly, tapped the link, and watched as the familiar red N logo flared to life. The screen faded to black. Then came my voice, calm, haunting, steady. Every lie has an author. The first shot. A camera panning across a dimly lit studio. Fragments of the documentary flashed in rhythm. Victims' testimonies, archival footage, slow dissolves of truth layered over deception. The music built, low and tense. And then, at exactly the 38-second mark, white text filled the screen. Created by Ava Morgan. It was surreal. 2 years of buried work. The trail, and silence condensed into one line. My name didn't just appear, it declared itself. The trailer cut to black, and Netflix's logo returned with the release date. I sat frozen. Outside, the first sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a thin line of gold across my floor. My phone exploded. Texts, mentions, DMs, articles. Congratulations, Ava. You did it. Wait, wasn't your brother the one who... My notifications spiraled like fireworks. By 8 a.m., Ava Morgan was trending on Twitter. At 8:12, my brother called. I didn't answer. Shape. By noon, every entertainment outlet had picked up the story. Headlines shifted from admiration to confusion. Netflix credits change spark speculation around Morgan's siblings. Who is Ava Morgan, the true vision behind Framed Truths? Clips from Liam's award speech resurfaced, now accompanied by slow-motion edits and sarcastic captions. Someone had even added dramatic music and uploaded it under the title, "When You Steal Your Sister's Homework." It had over 500,000 views in 3 hours. I tried not to smile, but it was impossible. The universe, it seemed, had an impeccable sense of timing. Shaped by mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call from Elena. I answered on the first ring. "Congratulations," she said, her tone warm but measured. "You're officially trending in 18 countries." "That's hard to process," I admitted. "I figured it might be," she said. "Listen, press inquiries are coming fast. We're drafting a joint statement clarifying authorship. You don't need to say a word publicly. The work speaks for itself." "And Ava?" "Yeah. Don't read the comment sections. The internet loves you 1 minute and devours you the next." I smiled faintly. "I'm a filmmaker, Elena. I live in editing rooms. I know what selective framing can do." She laughed. "Fair point." When we hung up, I sat for a long moment, absorbing the silence. It wasn't peace exactly. It was something heavier, like standing in the echo of a thunderclap. Around 6 p.m., I finally turned on the TV. Every entertainment network had the trailer playing on repeat. The image of my name against that black screen appeared again and again. And then, in a surreal twist, an anchor said, "We've reached out to Liam Morgan for comment." They cut to footage of him leaving a studio earlier that day, surrounded by reporters. Cameras flashed. He wore sunglasses, but his jaw was tight, his stride uneven. "Liam, did your sister actually write the project?" one journalist shouted. He didn't answer at first. Then he said, too quickly, "It was a collaboration." The video froze on that frame, his mouth half open, caught mid-lie. The anchor's tone was almost gleeful. "Seems like the Morgans have some family drama to unpack." I muted the TV. For years, I'd imagined this moment, the world finally seeing through him. But now that it was happening, I didn't feel vindictive. I felt exhausted. I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped onto the balcony. The sky was streaked pink and violet, the city glowing beneath it. From here, the billboards looked like stars, bright, distant, untouchable. Somewhere down there, Liam was probably pacing his apartment, rehearsing explanations, blaming editors, spinning damage control. And me? I was done explaining. Shape later that night, I opened my email to find one message from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "You win." I didn't need to open it to know who it was from. Still, I clicked. "Ava, I hope you're proud of yourself. You turned our work into a scandal. You think Netflix cares about you? They'll move on. Fame doesn't last, especially for people like you. You were never built for this world." No signature, but he didn't need one. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I deleted the message. Not because it hurt, but because it no longer mattered. He was wrong about one thing, though. I was built for this world. I just had to rebuild myself first. Shape, that night I couldn't sleep again. I lay in the dark, phone face down on the nightstand, and listened to the hum of traffic below. It struck me then. Revenge doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like silence after chaos. It's calm, clean, almost sad. But inside that sadness, there's clarity. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing his approval. I didn't need to prove I was talented. The trailer had done that for me. Still, I couldn't ignore the ache of what was lost, not the credit. But the brother I thought I had, we'd grown up in the same house, shared the same dreams. Somewhere along the way, his turned into hunger. Mine turned into hope. And when hunger meets hope, one of them always starves. I turned over, stared at the ceiling, and whispered into the darkness. "You told me I'd never be famous, Liam." The words hung in the still air, soft but sharp. Then, almost smiling, I added, "Guess you were half right. I didn't become famous. I earned it." The city lights shimmered through the curtains like applause that didn't need sound. For the first time in years, I felt awake. Tomorrow would bring interviews, headlines, contracts, noise. But tonight, there was only quiet victory. And that was enough. Shaped the first time, I saw my face on a billboard. I didn't cry. I thought I would. I thought I'd stop in the middle of Sunset Boulevard, stare up, and feel something huge and cinematic. But instead, I just stood there, coffee in hand, watching traffic blur past beneath my name. Ava Morgan, creator of Frame Truths. It didn't look real. Maybe because it wasn't the moment that made me famous. It was the moment that confirmed I already was. A group of tourists stopped beside me, taking selfies with the billboard in the background. One of them, a girl no older than 19, glanced at me twice, recognition flickering across her face. "Wait, are you?" "Yeah," I said, smiling softly. "Oh my God," she gasped. "You're Ava Morgan. I watched the trailer like 10 times. It's insane. You're so inspiring." I thanked her politely, posed for one quick photo, and watched her walk away, giddy, unburdened, blissfully unaware of the wreckage beneath my success. The fame was flattering, but it wasn't clean. By the time I reached my office, my assistant Naomi was waiting with a stack of interview requests. Variety, Vanity Fair, Hollywood Insider. "Everyone wants you this week," she said. "And Netflix confirmed your segment for the Daily Lens on Thursday." "That soon?" I asked. She smiled. "That's how momentum works." I sat at my desk, the same one I'd bought secondhand 3 years ago when I was broke and desperate. Now it was buried beneath contracts, invitation letters, and offers for speaking engagements. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like standing in someone else's life. Still, I went through the motions. Hair, makeup, wardrobe. I practiced my talking points with PR. I smiled at the right places, avoided the wrong words. Every sentence had to be measured. Enough vulnerability to humanize me, enough confidence to make them believe I'd always belonged here. By Thursday, I was sitting under studio lights, mic clipped to my blouse, while the host smiled at me like we were old friends. "Welcome, Ava Morgan," she said brightly, "the woman behind Frame Truths. First of all, congratulations. The trailer broke streaming records in 24 hours." "Thank you," I said, keeping my voice calm, polished. She leaned forward. "So, let's address what everyone's been talking about. Your brother, Liam Morgan. He's been silent since the trailer dropped. What's your relationship like now?" There it was, the question. The one every journalist had been waiting to ask. I folded my hands on my lap. Liam and I grew up loving stories. We just learned to tell them differently. That's a very diplomatic answer. I smiled faintly. I'm in the storytelling business. Diplomacy is part of it. The audience chuckled, and the host moved on, but I could feel the unspoken narrative pulsing between us. The sister who stayed quiet, the brother who fell, the poetic justice of it all. The interview went viral within hours. My quote, "We just learned to tell them differently," became a trending sound on TikTok. People layered it over clips of the trailer. editing in old footage of Liam's award speech with captions like, "When karma has better timing than your PR team." The internet was merciless, and I didn't stop it. 2 nights later, I attended the official premiere party. The venue was a sleek rooftop in downtown LA, all glass walls and hanging Edison bulbs. Journalists, executives, and influencers mingled under a sunset that looked airbrushed. I wore black, classic, understated, deliberate, the kind of outfit that said control. As I made my way through the crowd, people stopped to congratulate me. Words like brilliant, powerful, visionary blurred together until they felt meaningless. Every handshake, every compliment was another flashbulb in a storm. I didn't quite believe. Then I heard his voice. Enjoying the spotlight, I froze. The air around me thinned. Liam stood by the bar, half in shadow, drink in hand. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, beard unkempt, suit slightly wrinkled. But the arrogance hadn't faded. It never did. "Didn't think you'd show up," I said evenly. "It's still my premiere, technically." He smirked, then added, "At least it was supposed to be." I sipped my drink, not giving him the satisfaction of emotion. "You really shouldn't be here, Liam." "Why not? It's a celebration, isn't it? Family should celebrate together." His smile was brittle. Beneath it, I saw something new, fear disguised as charm. He leaned closer. "You think this is over? Netflix will get bored. They always do. They'll chew you up and move on." I tilted my head. Maybe. But they'll remember the taste. For a second, his expression faltered. Then he forced a laugh. "You've changed, Ava." "No," I said quietly. "You just never paid attention." I turned to leave, but he caught my wrist. Not hard, just enough to make me stop. "Don't do this," he hissed. "You think you've won, but you're alone. Everyone who claps for you now will vanish when the noise dies. Fame doesn't make you whole." I met his eyes. "Neither did being your shadow." I pulled my hand free. The glass in his hand trembled slightly before he set it down. As I walked away, I felt something shift, not just in the room, but in me. For the first time, I wasn't angry. I was done. An hour later, she smiled. "You handled him perfectly. The press saw. So did the execs." "I didn't do it for them." "I know," she said gently. "But sometimes, doing it for yourself ends up inspiring others." I looked down at the glass, bubbles rising like tiny comets. "Do you think I went too far?" "No," she said. "He went too far. You just turned the lights back on." Her words lingered as the music swelled behind us. The sound of people celebrating something they only half understood. Across the rooftop, cameras flashed. Someone shouted my name. I smiled automatically, the way stars are trained to. But inside, something quieter hummed. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was release. Still, as I glanced over the balcony railing at the sprawl of the city, I couldn't help but whisper to myself, "I wonder what he'll do next." Because if there was one thing I knew about Liam Morgan, it was this. He'd never let a story end without trying to rewrite the final act. Shape 3 days after the premiere, the headlines changed tone. Not overnight, not suddenly, like a tide reversing in slow motion. The same outlets that had celebrated me began using softer words for him. Liam Morgan breaks his silence. A misunderstood creative seeks forgiveness. Forgiveness. That word sat like a splinter in my chest. It started with a single interview, streamed live on a mid-tier news network, framed in warm lighting, sympathy painted across every shot. I hadn't planned to watch it. I told myself I wouldn't. But curiosity is a cruel habit. At 7 p.m., I found myself sitting on my couch, remote in hand, watching my brother perform Remorse. He wore a navy suit, the kind that photographs sincerity. The host leaned toward him like a priest, hearing confession. "Liam, you faced serious allegations from your sister, Ava Morgan. Do you want to set the record straight?" He sighed, rehearsed, deliberate. Look, mistakes were made. I'll admit that. The creative process is messy. Ideas overlap, but Ava's brilliant. And if I overshadowed her, it was never my intent. I felt my jaw tighten. Overshadowed? He'd erased me. He continued, voice low and earnest. I love my sister. I always have. She's emotional, passionate. Sometimes that passion makes her see betrayal where there isn't any. There it was. The trap, wrapped in empathy. He wasn't attacking me. He was framing me, the fragile woman undone by her own ambition. The host nodded, suitably moved. That's very big of you to say. Liam smiled modestly. At the end of the day, we're family. Family heals. The audience clapped. I muted the TV. For a long minute, I just stared at the frozen image of his face. Soft lighting, wet eyes, that same manipulative calm I'd grown up with. I knew that expression. It was the one he used on teachers, on girlfriends, on investors. The forgive me face that hid a knife behind its smile. And the worst part? It worked. Within an hour, Twitter was divided. Half the comments still called him a fraud. The other half wrote things like, at least he apologized. She should forgive him, they're siblings. This cancel culture thing is too much. By midnight, one headline even read, Ava Morgan refuses to reconcile. Has success made her cold? I closed my laptop. So this was what victory felt like. A cycle of applause and accusation, truth and distortion. Revenge might have restored my name, but it hadn't silenced his talent for rewriting the story. Shape the next morning. I met with Elena in her office. She looked exhausted too. He's playing the sympathy card, she said, scrolling through the newsfeed. Classic misdirection. He's not denying the theft. He's reframing it as a misunderstanding. He's good at that, I murmured. She looked at me. We can issue a counterstatement, but it'll only fuel the fire. The more you defend, the more equal the two of you appear. So I stay quiet? For now, she said. Silence isn't surrender, it's contrast. I nodded, though the words felt heavier this time. I was tired of silence, of always being the calm one, the rational one. A world rewarded composure, but forgot how much it cost. That evening, I went for a walk down by the pier. The ocean smelled like salt and smoke, waves slapping against the wooden posts. Couples laughed nearby, kids chased pigeons. Normal life. A group of college students recognized me. They hesitated before approaching. Hey, one of them said, you're Ava Morgan, right? Yeah. We just wanted to say your film changed how we look at truth. It's raw, you know? Their sincerity caught me off guard. For a moment, I forgot about the noise. Thank you, I said. That means more than you think. When they walked away, I sat on a bench and watched the horizon swallow the sun. It hit me then, the strange paradox of revenge. You can win the battle, prove you were right, reclaim your name, and still feel the hollow echo of everything you lost along the way. I missed my brother. Not this version of him, but the boy who used to sneak popcorn into midnight movies, who told me once, you'll be the storyteller, I'll be the face. Maybe he meant it, maybe he didn't, but back then I believed him. Now I just wished he'd left the story alone. Shape. By the weekend, his strategy was working. The pity machine had shifted gears. Photos of him at charity events, emotional captions about family first. I stared at it for a long time. The comments pouring in, heart emojis, forgiveness quotes, strangers begging me to be the bigger person. Naomi texted me a screenshot with a single message. Don't let him spin this. I typed a reply, he's already spinning it, but didn't send it. Because deep down, I knew something she didn't. Liam wasn't fighting for redemption. He was fighting for relevance. And relevance is a currency people will counterfeit if they have to. Sunday night, my phone buzzed again. A number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? It's Liam. My pulse quickened. How'd you get this number? I have my ways, he said lightly. Can we meet? No. Please, Ava, one conversation. Public place, if that makes you feel safe. I almost laughed. You should have thought about my safety 2 years ago. This isn't about that, he said, voice lower now. You're winning, I get it. But you're burning everything down with it. Family, reputation, legacy. I stayed quiet. He pressed on. I want to apologize, off camera this time, no audience, just you and me. There was something in his tone I hadn't heard before. Not guilt, not arrogance, desperation. I hesitated. Meeting him was a risk, but some part of me needed closure, if only to look him in the eye one last time. Tomorrow, I said. No cameras, no handlers. Noon at Griffith Park. He exhaled, relieved. Thank you. When the call ended, I stared at my reflection in the window. The city lights flickered behind me, like ghosts of old choices. For the first time in months, I wasn't sure if I was walking toward peace or another trap. The next day, I woke before sunrise. My reflection looked tired, older somehow, but my eyes were clear. I didn't wear armor this time. No blazer, no heels, just jeans and a gray sweater. The kind of outfit that didn't need to perform. Liam stepped out wearing jeans and a jacket. No suit this time, no performance polish. He looked smaller somehow, thinner, older, the edges of charm worn down by headlines and sleepless nights. He spotted me and hesitated before walking over. Hey, he said softly. I folded my arms. You're on time. That's new. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Didn't want to give you another reason to hate me. I don't hate you, I said. I just finally stopped needing you to like me. He exhaled, shoulders sagging. Fair enough. For a minute we just stood there, awkwardly, like you said you wanted to apologize. He nodded, eyes flicking down to the gravel. Yeah, I did. Silence stretched, broken only by the crunch of footsteps from a passing hiker. Finally, he said, You were right. About everything. The project, the lies, the manipulation. I told myself it was business, but really, it was jealousy. You had something I didn't. Patience. Real artistry. I knew people liked you, so I made sure they liked me more. I stared at him, searching for the smirk that usually followed his confessions, but it never came. He continued, voice rougher now. When you sent that first draft to me, I read it, and I just knew it was brilliant. I also knew I'd never top it. So instead of helping you, I tried to own it. I told myself I was protecting you from the industry. That lie kept me sane. A lump formed in my throat. I didn't want to feel sorry for him. But guilt and love are complicated twins. I spent years thinking you didn't believe in me, I said quietly. Turns out you did. You just didn't want to admit it. He looked up, eyes glassy. I'm sorry, Ava. Not the PR apology. Not the press one. The real kind. You deserved better from me. I believed him. Maybe not completely, but enough. We started walking down the trail, slow, aimless. The city shimmered in the distance, like a memory we both wanted to forget. I watched the trailer, he said. It's incredible. Thank you. I mean it. You captured something I never could. The honesty, it's brutal. That's what truth is. He nodded, kicking at a stone. You know, when I went on TV, I thought if I looked humble enough, people would forgive me. But they didn't. I stayed silent because I was tired of fighting on your stage. He winced. I deserve that. We reached a lookout point. The wind picked up, carrying bits of dust and the faint echo of laughter from somewhere down the hill. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said, voice barely above a whisper. I just didn't want our story to end with headlines. I studied him, the slope of his shoulders, the tremor in his hands. The boy who once helped me build cardboard cameras in our backyard. For the first time, I saw the difference between revenge and release. You're right, I said finally. This can't end with headlines, but it can end with honesty. He met my gaze, uncertain. What does that mean? It means I forgive you, He blinked, confused. Just like that? No, I said softly. Not just like that. I've forgiven you 100 times in my head and taken it back every single one. But I'm tired, Liam. Carrying anger feels like wearing your mistakes as jewelry. He swallowed hard. You really are better than me. I smiled faintly. No, I just stopped trying to prove I wasn't. For a moment, neither of us spoke. A hawk circled overhead, its shadow sliding across the rocks. He turned toward the view. So what happens now? You move on. Fix what you can. Stop pretending you're the hero of every story. And you? I tell new ones. He nodded slowly. You'll be great. I already am. That earned the smallest laugh. Genuine, weary, human. We walked back to the parking lot in silence. When we reached his car, he turned to me one last time. For what it's worth, he said, I'm proud of you. I know, I replied. That's why this hurts less than it should. He hesitated like he wanted to hug me but didn't. Instead, he gave a small nod and climbed into his car. I watched the sedan pull away, dust rising behind it like the last remnants of a long argument finally settling. When the sound of the engine faded, I looked out over the city again. The air felt lighter, the noise quieter. Somewhere, someone was probably still dissecting our drama online. But for the first time, I didn't care. He was right about one thing. Family doesn't disappear. But sometimes, forgiveness is the only way to let it stop haunting you. I turned back toward the trail, sunlight glinting off the metal railings, and whispered, The story's yours again, world. I've told my part. Then I walked away, not as a victim, not even as a victor, but as someone finally free of both roles. Shape Peace is quieter than I imagined. Not soft, just quiet, like the air after thunder. A week passed after Griffith Park, and Los Angeles kept spinning as if nothing monumental had happened. The tabloids moved on to another scandal. Netflix announced 2 new projects, and my name slowly slid down the trending list until it disappeared completely. I thought I'd feel lost when that happened. Instead, I felt something stranger. Relief. The world had finally stopped looking at me. I spent the first few days in silence. No interviews, no red carpets, no social media. I deleted Twitter from my phone, turned off notifications, and replaced my morning routine of scrolling with something radical: breathing. My apartment felt bigger now. The same walls that once closed in on me during sleepless nights suddenly seemed spacious, forgiving. I cooked again, badly. I burned toast, spilled coffee, laughed at myself. Normal things. But peace has its ghosts. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected it to be him. It wasn't. Liam had gone quiet after our meeting. No press, no posts, no statements. Just silence. The kind that feels both respectful and suspicious. Part of me worried it wouldn't last. Another part hoped it would. Shape Netflix had invited me to a luncheon the following week. Small, private, executive only. I almost declined. I almost didn't. That's exactly why you should be here, she said. Presence is power. Around the table sat producers, directors, and showrunners. A few I recognized from panels or press events. Most were strangers. When introductions circled to me, I simply said, Ava Morgan, writer and creative director. No one mentioned the scandal. No one mentioned Liam. It was as if the entire industry had quietly decided to let the dust settle without choosing sides. After lunch, one of the executives, a woman named Natalie, pulled me aside. I read your follow-up pitch, she said. The anthology series about truth and perception. It's brilliant. Thank you, I said. We'd like to greenlight it for development. Early stage, but you'd have full creative control. Her words landed like sunlight on frozen ground. Warm, but disorienting. Full control, I repeated. She smiled. You've earned it. That night, when I got home, I sat in front of my laptop staring at the contract. The letters blurred until they looked like water. It wasn't just another job. It was proof that I'd built something from the ashes, something mine. But along with pride came an ache I hadn't expected. Who was I when I wasn't fighting him? For so long, my ambition had been shaped by resistance, by the need to prove, to reclaim, to rewrite. Now there was no war left to win, just work, just creation. And creation is lonelier than vengeance. Shape a few days later, my mother called. I hadn't heard from her since before the park. "Ava," she said cautiously, "I had dinner with your brother last night." My stomach tightened. "How is he?" "Different," she said after a pause. "Quieter. He told me about Griffith Park. He said you forgave him." "I did." She hesitated. "I don't think he knows what to do with that." "Neither do I admitted. She sighed. "You two were always the same. Too proud to admit how much you cared." "Maybe," I said softly. "But pride was all we had growing up, remember?" Her silence was answer enough. Before hanging up, she added, "He asked me to tell you he's moving to New York, starting over." I nodded even though she couldn't see it. "That's good. Are you sure you're okay?" "Mom," I said, half smiling, "for the first time in years, I think I might be." Shape. The next morning, I went for a walk through downtown. It was early, the streets still waking, the air cool and sharp. I stopped outside an old theater that had been shuttered for years, its marquee blank, its windows dusty. I pressed my hand against the glass. Inside, I could still see the faint outline of the stage lights, the ghost of performance. It reminded me of how stories never really end. They just wait for someone new to step into them. On impulse, I took a photo of the building and sent it to Elena with a message. "Found our next location." She replied almost instantly, "I trust your vision." That line stayed with me all day. "I trust your vision." 4 words I'd spent a lifetime wanting to hear from someone, and never once from my own brother. It hit me then that maybe closure wasn't about forgiveness, or justice, or even peace. Maybe it was about finally hearing what you needed to hear from yourself. That night, I wrote again. Not scripts or statements, just words. Private, unfiltered, mine. Sometimes redemption isn't applause. It's the moment you stop checking who's clapping. The sentence felt true enough to keep. Shape a week later, I received a letter, not an email. A real handwritten letter on plain paper, no return address. The handwriting was unmistakable. "Ava, I'm leaving tomorrow. I don't expect forgiveness beyond what you've already given, but I wanted to say this before I go. I watched the full documentary. For the first time, I saw what you were really trying to say. You weren't exposing me. You were freeing both of us. Don't waste your peace trying to fix what's meant to stay broken. L." I read it twice, folded it carefully, and placed it in the back of my journal. Then I stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker like breathing. The air smelt faintly of rain. For the first time, it didn't. The first production meeting for my new series felt nothing like victory. It felt like standing on the edge of an unfinished bridge. The Netflix lot shimmered under late morning sun, clean concrete and glass that smelled faintly of ambition and disinfectant. The conference room buzzed with low conversation. Story editors, line producers, 2 camera directors, and Elena at the head of the table. When I walked in, the room fell quiet in that polite, expectant way people fall silent when a name has become its own headline. "Morning," I said, sliding my bag onto the table. "Let's build something honest." They smiled, relaxed, started talking again. The anthology's working title was Shifting Lines. Each episode would explore truth and perception, how memory edits reality, how stories distort when passed from one mouth to another. The irony wasn't lost on me. Elena opened her laptop. "First topic, pilot episode. You wanted to base it on a real case study?" "Yeah," I said, clicking the remote. The screen behind me lit up with an image, a street corner, a blurred photograph, a single witness statement contradicted by 6 others. This one, the perfect metaphor for everything we've lived through. A young assistant named Rory raised his hand. So it's autobiographical? I smiled faintly. Everything is, if you look hard enough. They laughed, and tension eased. We dove into story structure, tone, pacing, music. For 2 hours, I listened more than I spoke, taking notes, asking questions, absorbing energy. For the first time in months, my brain moved without pain. When the meeting ended, Elena caught me at the door. You looked alive in there. I feel it, I said. Good. You know the network's already calling you their quiet genius, right? I rolled my eyes. That sounds like someone who doesn't return emails. She grinned. Well, they're not wrong. You've become a brand now, Ava. Careful, they'll want to turn you into a franchise next. I laughed, but her words echoed long after I left. Shape. That night, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by scripts and notes. The walls looked less like a home, and more like a storyboard, papers pinned, color-coded. Arranged by theme. Freedom, I discovered, is noisy. It doesn't sit still. My mind raced with new ideas, each one fighting for air. Yet beneath the creative rush was something quieter. Fear. Without a villain, who was I supposed to fight? At 2 a.m., I made tea and stared at the skyline through my window. Los Angeles glowed like a restless heartbeat. Somewhere out there, deals were being made, careers invented, reputations traded. Mine, somehow, had survived the fire. I opened my notebook and began writing. Not lines of dialogue, but questions. What happens after redemption? How do you stay human when people start calling you a symbol? The kettle clicked as it cooled. I wrote until dawn. A few days later, I met with the show's cinematographer, a quiet woman named June. In an old warehouse, we were scouting as a potential filming location. Dust floated in shafts of light. The air smelled like metal and history. It's perfect, she said, looking through her lens. Raw, textured, imperfect, just like your writing. I glanced at the cracked walls. You make decay sound poetic. It is, she said simply. Decay means something lived here. Her words stayed with me. Maybe my own story had to decay a little before it could become art. That afternoon, I went home and edited the pilot script again, adding a line to the narrator's monologue. Truth doesn't die when it's buried. It ferments until someone's brave enough to taste it. I didn't realize until later that I was writing about myself. A week into pre-production, Netflix's PR team reached out. They wanted a feature piece, a Where She Is Now story for the trades. I groaned but agreed. Visibility still mattered, even if I didn't crave it. The interview took place in a minimalist studio. Lights, cameras, soft music playing in the background. The journalist, a kind-eyed man named Thomas, began gently. You've become a symbol of creative integrity, he said. How does that feel? I laughed softly, uncomfortable. Integrity is easier to claim than to practice. He smiled. Do you miss your brother? The question hit harder than I expected. I miss who I thought he was, I said after a pause. But sometimes letting go of a person is how you let them find the version of themselves they buried. That's a beautiful answer. It's the true one, I said. The interview ran a week later. It wasn't sensational, just honest. The final quote they printed became its own headline. The story was never about revenge. It was about remembering who I was before I needed it. Ava Morgan. The internet loved it. For once, there were no battles in the comments, no gossip threads, just quiet admiration. But the best reaction came privately. A message popped into my inbox that night. From Liam Morgan, subject, proud. That's all. Proud. No attachments, no signature, no manipulation, just one word. I stared at it for a long time. Then I closed my laptop without replying. Some sentences are perfect because they're complete. Shape production officially began 2 months later. The first day on set was chaos. Cables, clatter, shouting, energy. And in the middle of it all, I stood still. watching my vision come alive through other people's hands. The first take was rough, the second smoother, the third magic. When the director called cut, a hush fell over the room. For a moment, everyone seemed to feel the same electricity I did, the hum of creation happening in real time. I felt tears threaten, but I blinked them away. Not because I wanted to look strong, but because this time, the emotion wasn't pain. It was gratitude. Elena came up behind me, resting a hand on my shoulder. "Welcome back, Ava." "Back?" I asked. She smiled. "To yourself." Shape that night, I walked home instead of calling a car. The air was cool, and the city buzzed softly around me. Passing a billboard for framed truths, I stopped and looked up one last time. The glow of my name didn't fill me with pride or anger anymore, just peace. I whispered, almost playfully, "Your move, universe." For once, the universe stayed quiet, and that silence felt like applause. The night shifting lines premiered. Los Angeles looked almost gentle. It was one of those rare evenings when the smog thinned enough for stars to show, faint and far, but real. Netflix had rented a small theater in West Hollywood for the launch. No red carpet, no flashbulbs, just the cast, the crew, and a few select guests. Elena insisted on keeping it intimate. "Let the work speak," she'd said. I liked that. I'd had enough of speaking for a lifetime. Inside, the lights dimmed, chatter softened, and the first frame filled the screen. The opening monologue, my words, my voice, rolled out into the dark. Truth is elastic. Pull it too far, and it breaks. Hold it too close, and it blinds you. A ripple of silence followed. Not applause, not reaction, attention. Pure, undivided attention. For 47 minutes, the room didn't move. Every heartbeat of editing, every breath of sound design, every line of narration felt like reclaiming something that had been taken and then returned transformed. When the credits appeared, created by Ava Morgan, I didn't look at the screen. I watched the audience instead. Some smiled, some looked stunned. One woman dabbed her eyes. It wasn't pride I felt, it was stillness. The kind of quiet that means you finally matched the inside of your head to the outside of the world. Shape. After the screening, people drifted into the lobby. Glasses clinked. Laughter returned. Elena appeared beside me with a champagne flute. "You did it," she said simply. I smiled. "We did." She shook her head. "You wrote the map. We just followed it." Across the room, a reporter from the Hollywood Herald waved. "Quick quote, Ava?" I sighed. "Do I have to?" Elena grinned. "One sentence. Make it count." The reporter clicked his recorder. "How does it feel, reclaiming the narrative after everything that happened last year?" I thought for a moment, then said, "Redemption isn't the opposite of revenge. It's what happens when revenge stops being enough." He blinked, smiled, scribbled it down. Perfect. Shape the reviews hit by morning. A haunting masterpiece. Ava Morgan cements her status as the voice of moral realism. Shifting lines proves that truth that can be cinematic. I skimmed them over coffee, half amused, half dazed. Praise used to feel like oxygen. Now it felt like background noise. What mattered was that I'd said what I needed to say, and no one could edit me out of it. The show trended worldwide for 3 days. Clips flooded TikTok, essays bloomed on Reddit, and a film professor somewhere started calling it required viewing. But the moment that stayed with me wasn't digital. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. No return address again. Inside was a single page, typed this time. I watched it twice. "You finally told the story the right way. Keep going." I folded the paper carefully, the same way I'd folded his first note. Maybe people don't change all at once. Maybe they just learn how to tell the truth in smaller doses. Shape's success came differently this time. Slower, kinder. I started visiting film schools, guest lecturing about authorship and ethics. Students lined up after class to talk, young, bright-eyed, eager. One girl handed me a worn notebook. "I was going to quit writing," she said. "Then I saw your interview. The one where you said, 'Remember who you were before you needed revenge.' I think I remembered." I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged her. That night, on the flight home, I stared out the window at the clouds and thought, maybe this is what legacy really is. Not what you leave behind, but what you give permission for others to begin. Shape months passed, a weird season arrived, and Shifting Lines earned 3 nominations. I went to the ceremony only because Elena insisted. When my name was called for Best Original Series Concept, I walked to the stage through polite applause that felt both surreal and distant. The trophy was heavier than I expected. I used to think justice and peace were the same thing. I said into the microphone, "They're not. Justice fixes the story. Peace lets it end." The room went silent, then erupted. Cameras flashed, but for once, the light didn't blind me. It felt warm. Shape later that night, I slipped away from the after-party and drove up into the hills. From the overlook, the city glittered like spilled diamonds. Somewhere down there, people were celebrating, creating, breaking, forgiving. I thought of Liam again, not with anger, not even with nostalgia, but with a kind of distant gratitude. He had been the antagonist that forced me to become the author. I whispered into the wind. We both wrote something worth remembering. No echo came back, only the steady hum of a city still telling stories. Shape. When I got home, I placed the award on my shelf beside an old Polaroid of 2 kids at the beach. Me with my plastic camera, him with his sandcastle. For years, that picture had symbolized loss. Now it just felt like history. I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my notebook, and began outlining season 2. The first line came easily. Some truths heal only after being told out loud. I sat back, smiling. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of sirens and laughter. Life, messy and endless, moving forward. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like I was catching up to it. I was part of it again. Shape, New York greeted me with wind sharp enough to taste. It whipped down Fifth Avenue, folding my coat around my legs as if to remind me that Los Angeles sunlight had made me soft. I hadn't been here in years, not since film school, not since the version of me who still needed permission to dream. The festival driver held up a sign, Ava Morgan, keynote speaker. Even after all this time, the words felt foreign. The car crawled through midtown traffic toward the Javits Center, where the International Storytellers Forum was already in full swing. Billboards blinked my face every few blocks. Netflix, 1,000 expectations. When the moderator introduced me, Ava Morgan, creator of Shifting Lines, the applause was polite, measured, professional. I walked out, smiled, and began. Shape, I used to think stories were about heroes and villains, I told them. Then I realized most stories are just about people trying to survive their own mistakes. The crowd leaned in. I spoke for 40 minutes about authorship, ethics, and resilience, about how silence can be both a shield and a prison. Every word felt lighter leaving my mouth. When I finished, they stood, not cheering, not screaming, just standing in quiet respect. It was the kind of applause that felt like listening continued even after sound stopped. Afterward came the usual blur, handshakes, selfies, conference lanyards brushing my shoulder. Then I saw him, Liam. He stood near the back of the room, half hidden by a pillar. No press badge, no entourage, just jeans, a dark coat, and that same uncertain stillness from Griffith Park. For a heartbeat, I froze. Then our eyes met. He lifted a tentative hand in greeting. I nodded, small, neutral. Elena, who'd flown in with me, noticed. Is that? Yes. Do you want me to? No, I said quietly. I've got it. Shape, I found him in the hallway later, near a vending machine humming like static. New York suits you, I said. He smiled faintly. You always did like metaphors. What are you doing here, Liam? I saw your name on the schedule. Figured I should hear what redemption sounds like when it's earned. That's poetic for you. Occupational hazard, he said. I'm teaching now. Film theory at NYU. That caught me off guard. You teaching? Yeah. Turns out students don't care about my past. They care about their future. It's humbling. He looked different. Thinner, yes, but also steadier. Like guilt had finally burned down to something usable. I'm glad, I said, and I meant it. He nodded toward the exit. Can we walk? Outside, winter sunlight bounced off the Hudson. We fell into step, the city roaring around us. Taxis, horns, laughter. The percussion of lives colliding. I saw shifting lines, he said. All of it. And? You told the truth. That's what writers do. Maybe, he said. But you told it without cruelty. That's rarer. I studied him. You sound like someone who finally listened. I did, he said. To you, to Mom, to myself. Therapy helps. He chuckled softly. Can you believe that? Me, in therapy? I can, I said. That's growth. We stopped at the riverfront railing. The wind bit at our faces. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, I don't expect us to go back. I just didn't want to leave things half forgiven. I exhaled slowly. You're not half forgiven, Liam. You're fully forgiven. I just don't know if we fit in each other's lives anymore. He nodded. That's fair. A ferry horn echoed across the water. He leaned on the railing. You know, I used to think fame would fix the hole inside me. Now I think maybe it just made it visible. That's the thing about light, I said. It exposes everything, even what you don't want to see. He smiled sadly. You always had the better lines. I laughed, the sound surprising us both. You just had the better timing. For a moment, it felt almost easy. Two siblings again, teasing between breaths of cold air. He turned to me. I'm proud of you, Ava. Not in that fake press way. In the real, I finally understand way. Thank you. And if you ever need a guest lecturer on creative ethics, I raised an eyebrow. You volunteering as a cautionary tale? Exactly. We both laughed quietly. Shape. When we parted, he extended his hand. I took it. The handshake felt more honest than any apology ever could. Take care of yourself, Liam. You too, sis. He walked away down the pier, shoulders squared, disappearing into the crowd of ordinary lives. I stood there a while, watching until he vanished into the rhythm of the city. Something loosened inside me, like the last knot untangling. That evening, I met Elena for dinner in a small jazz bar downtown. She noticed the calm on my face before I spoke. You saw him, she said. I did. And? He's human again. She smiled. So are you. We listened to the band play for a while. Saxophone, bass, the soft heartbeat of drums. Funny, I said, staring into my drink. For years, I thought the story was about betrayal, but maybe it was always about recovery. Elena tilted her glass toward me. To recovery, then. I clinked hers lightly. And to starting over, without erasing the past. Outside, snow began to fall, thin and hesitant. Through the window, the city glowed under it, shimmering, forgiving. Shape later, back in my hotel room, I opened my notebook and wrote one line at the top of a blank page. Closure isn't when the past stops hurting. It's when it stops guiding you. I set down my pen, turned off the lamp, and let the city's hum fade into sleep. For the first time in years, I didn't dream of revenge, or loss, or even justice. I dreamed of a blank page, waiting, patient, endless. Shape Los Angeles smelled different when I came home. not the heavy sweetness of exhaust and orange blossom that used to cling to everything, but something lighter. Maybe because I finally was. The taxi rolled past the Netflix tower, past murals of actors I didn't recognize, and turned toward the hills. From the window, I saw my own billboard, faded now, half replaced by a new show. I didn't mind. Fame was supposed to fade. That was its job. When I unlocked the apartment door, just motes danced in the sun like glitter someone forgot to sweep away. The place had been empty for nearly a month, but it still smelled faintly of coffee and late-night writing. Home, in other words. I set my suitcase down, made tea, and opened the curtains. The skyline shimmered. Somewhere down there, stories were being born, rewritten, stolen, redeemed. The whole messy ecosystem I'd fought so hard to survive. This time, I wanted to do more than survive it. I wanted to change it. Shape 2 weeks later, I started teaching a master class at the Los Angeles Institute of Film and Media. The dean had emailed out of nowhere, offering me a guest slot on ethics and authorship. "Come talk about ownership," she'd written. "Our students need to hear it from someone who's lived it." The first day, I walked into a classroom buzzing with energy. 30 students, laptops open, caffeine humming through their veins. They clapped when I entered, which felt strange. Applause in a classroom always does. "Okay," I said, setting my notes aside. "Let's skip the hero worship. Tell me why you're here." A hand shot up. A nervous boy with ink-stained fingers said, "Because you didn't let them silence you." Another student added, "Because you proved that truth matters more than exposure." I smiled. "Then I'll tell you the real secret. Exposure is truth, just not the kind you expect. The more honest you are with your work, the more it exposes you. That's why it's scary." They scribbled furiously, as if I'd just revealed an algorithm. I laughed. "Don't write that down. Feel it instead." By the end of the hour, the room felt alive, like possibility had a pulse. Shape 1 student stayed behind after class, a quiet girl named Maya, notebook hugged to her chest. "Ms. Morgan," she said softly, "I'm writing something personal, about family, about betrayal, I guess. But I'm scared people will think it's revenge." I looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Write it anyway. Let them think what they want. If you write from truth, revenge turns into release." She smiled, eyes bright with the kind of gratitude that stays. When she left, I sat alone in the empty classroom, sunlight stretching across the floorboards, and realized I had just said something I finally believed. Shape outside academia, Shifting Lines 2 was in development. The network wanted something bigger, darker, louder. I wanted something quieter. Stories about recovery instead of exposure. Eleda fought for me in every meeting. "Ava's strength is subtlety," she'd argue. "Let her breathe." Eventually, they agreed. The contract gave me near total autonomy. It felt strange to be trusted so completely after a lifetime of proving I deserved trust. On the first day of the writer's room, I brought donuts and a single sentence written on the whiteboard. "We're not here to tell perfect stories, just honest ones." The team stared at it, then nodded. We began. Shape evenings became my sanctuary again. I'd walk through the neighborhood, headphones off, letting the city's sounds replace the score that used to loop in my head. The one that played when I thought of Liam. Betrayal, ambition. I'd stop by the beach at Santa Monica. The horizon there never changed. Endless gray water, seagulls arguing over nothing. One night, I found myself laughing alone on the pier, realizing how absurdly peaceful normal life could be. That's when the call came. "Miss Morden?" The voice was young, male, nervous. "I'm Ben, assistant editor at Visionary Weekly. We're doing a feature called 10 Creators Who Changed the Industry Ethically. You're number 1. I nearly choked on my coffee. "That's ironic." He laughed awkwardly. "Would you mind a short interview? The others all cited you as their influence." For a second, I couldn't answer. Influence was the kind of word that used to belong to other people. Sure, I said finally, but only if we talk about them, not me. He hesitated. That's not how features work. It is now, I said. Shape, the article ran a month later. The headline read, Ava Morgan, the mentor who turned scars into storylines. I didn't expect to care, but the photograph they used stopped me cold. Me in the classroom, surrounded by students, mid-laugh. Not posed, not polished, just human. Elena texted the link with 3 words, legacy, not revenge. I stared at the screen until it blurred. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was what legacy looked like. Faces lit by something you helped ignite, not destroyed by it. Shape, that evening, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I answered on instinct. Hello? A familiar voice replied, warm, steady. It's Liam. My heart skipped, but didn't stumble. Hey. I read the article, he said. You're doing good work. So are you, I said. How's teaching? Challenging, rewarding, humbling. He chuckled. You'd like my students. They argue about everything. Sounds familiar. He hesitated. I wanted to thank you for forgiving me, for not letting me be the worst thing I did. I closed my eyes, smiling. You did that yourself, Liam. We didn't say goodbye right away. We talked about films, about Mom's new garden, about nothing. It felt normal. That was the miracle. When the call ended, I stood by the window, watching headlights weave through the night. For the first time, the city didn't feel like a battlefield or a proving ground. It felt like home, imperfect, alive, forgiving. I whispered to the glass, we made it. The reflection looking back at me wasn't the woman who'd been betrayed or the one who'd fought for justice. She was something simpler, a storyteller who had finally learned to let stories end. Shape. They started calling it framed truths too, before I'd even said a word. Headlines, hashtags, speculation. The whole machine roared back to life, as if I'd accidentally nudged a sleeping giant. It began with one rumor. Netflix in talks with Ava Morgan for sequel to her breakout docuseries. Within hours, my inbox filled with inquiries. PR wanted confirmation. Agents wanted numbers. Twitter wanted blood. Everyone wanted the same thing. The inside story about her brother. By noon, #FrameTruths2 was trending worldwide. I stared at the screen in disbelief. The irony almost made me laugh. I had built an anthology about perception and integrity, and now they wanted me to turn my own life into spectacle again. Just more polished this time. The phone rang. Elena, don't panic, she said before I could speak. I'm not panicking. I lied. The executives are floating the idea. They're testing market interest, nothing official. Testing interest means they already know it'll sell. She sighed. You know how this works. Controversy streams. I walked to the window, city lights slicing through the blinds. They want a confession tape, dressed as art. They want ratings. I won't do it. I didn't think you would, she said softly, but they'll push. Shape they did. 2 days later, Netflix called a meeting. The boardroom shimmered with screensavers and polite ambition. An executive named Jeffries smiled like he was about to deliver good news. Ava, congratulations on shifting lines. Huge numbers, massive completion rate. People connect to authenticity. I nodded warily. He continued. The audience still craves closure. They want the other side of your story. You and your brother, the human angle. Think of it as catharsis. Catharsis for who? Ava, this could redefine nonfiction. People want truth straight from the source, and no one can tell it but you. I can tell anything I want, I said. That doesn't mean I should. The room went quiet. Someone shifted papers. Finally, Elena spoke up. Let's give her time. She just wrapped a major series. We can revisit later. I shot her a grateful glance. Jeffrey smiled like a man confident patience would wear me down. Shape it didn't, But silence isn't armor. It's a mirror. By the weekend, journalists filled the gap with noise. Ava Morgan refuses to face her past. Why the Queen of Truth won't tell her own. Podcasts dissected my hesitation. Commentators speculated about what she's hiding. The irony was almost poetic. Integrity mistaken for fear. That Sunday, I met with my writing team. They tiptoed around the topic until Rory finally blurted it out. Are you ever going to do it? The sequel? No. But it would be huge, he said. You'd control the narrative this time. That's what they said last time. He fell silent. I looked at their faces, young, idealistic, hungry. I understood them. I used to believe exposure and truth were the same thing. Now I knew exposure only feels like truth when you're the one selling it. Shape. That night, I drove to the coast. The ocean was black glass under a bruised sky, waves whispering the kind of things only guilt can hear. I walked until the water lapped over my shoes. For the first time in a long while, I thought about the girl I used to be, the one clapping from the second row while her brother took the stage. She had wanted the world to see her pain so it could stop hurting. But the world doesn't heal you, it just applauds while you bleed. I sat on the sand and pulled out my phone. There were 50 new emails, all variations of the same question. Will you do it? Instead of replying, I opened a blank note and typed, not every truth belongs to the audience. I saved it, locked the screen, and let the ocean erase my footprints. Shape the next morning, a courier delivered a package from New York. Inside, a DVD case wrapped in brown paper. No note, no label. Just my name written in blue pen. I recognized the handwriting instantly. I slid the disc into my player. Static, Venom menu screen, lecture series, NYU Department of Film Ethics. Liam appeared on screen, standing in front of a whiteboard. He looked calm, older, grounded. He said, "Today's topic is accountability. How to own your mistakes without turning them into your brand." The students laughed softly. He continued, "Sometimes not telling your side is the most honest thing you can do. Silence can protect more truth than confession ever could." He smiled at the class. "Trust me, I learned that from someone better than me." I pressed pause. The fring froze on his face, mid-smile. I realized what he'd done. He'd given me permission to stay silent. That afternoon, I met Elena for coffee. She raised an eyebrow as I slid a single sheet of paper across the table, my official response to Netflix. She skimmed it and grinned. "You really wrote this?" "I really did." She read aloud. "The story has already been told. What comes next belongs to the future, not the past." She looked up. "They won't love it. I don't need them to," I said. "They'll respect it eventually," Elena smiled. "You know, you could have been a lawyer." "Too much truth in that profession," I said. We both laughed. Shape that night, the network released a brief statement. Ava Morgan confirms no plans for a sequel to Framed Truths. Her next project will focus on collective storytelling. The internet argued for a day, then moved on. Silence returned, not the fearful kind, but the earned kind. I poured a glass of wine, stepped onto my balcony, and watched the city lights pulse like heartbeat monitors. For once, the headlines weren't about me, and that, I realized, was the happiest ending I could have written. Shape the warehouse smelled like sawdust and hope. We converted it into a temporary studio, bare walls, folding chairs, cameras on tripods that looked too fragile to hold the weight of real stories. Sunlight spilled through high windows, catching the dust in lazy spirals. "This is it," Elena said beside me. "The collective project." I nodded, trying to ignore the flutter in my chest. "Feels like starting over." "Not over," she corrected. "Forward." The idea had come during one of those late-night walks, when silence stopped feeling like absence and started sounding like invitation. What if we created a space where people could tell their own truths? No narrators, no edits. No stars, just raw voices stitched together by honesty. Netflix had hesitated at first, No celebrities, no scandals, no marketable villains. But I'd built enough credibility that they finally said the words every creator dreams of. We trust your vision. That's how I found myself standing in a half-renovated building on the east side of Los Angeles, waiting for our first storytellers to arise. By noon, they trickled in. A bus driver, a nurse, a retired teacher, a man who'd spent 20 years wrongfully imprisoned. Different ages, races, accents, all carrying stories heavy enough to bow the air. I greeted each one personally. No crew introductions, no hierarchy. Just, "Hi, I'm Ava. Thank you for coming." The cameras rolled quietly in the background while we talked. No makeup, no staging. The bus driver, Rosa, went first. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the microphone. "I don't know how to start," she said. "Start where it hurts least," I told her. She took a deep breath. "Okay." Then she spoke about losing her husband during the pandemic, about working double shifts so her children could stay in school. Her voice cracked once, then steadied. When she finished, there wasn't applause, just silence, deep and respectful. That became the rhythm of the project, one story at a time, truth without choreography. Shape, after filming, the team lingered, reluctant to break the spell. June, our cinematographer, reviewed the footage on her monitor and whispered, "It feels sacred." "It is," I said. "We're holding someone's life in pixels." That night, I went home exhausted but peaceful. Editing would start soon, but for now, I just wanted to sit with what I'd heard. I poured tea, opened my notebook, and wrote. I used to believe stories were weapons. Maybe they're mirrors instead, showing us the parts of ourselves we forgot to forgive. The next morning, I found that line printed on a sticky note above the coffee machine at the studio. Someone on the crew had copied it. That small act, the quiet echo of belief, felt like success. Shape, weeks passed, the project grew. Word spread through community centers, shelters, and schools. People volunteered to share experiences of survival, addiction, love, and loss. Each one shifted something inside me. One afternoon, a teenage boy named Jordan came in. He wore a hoodie 2 sizes too big and spoke barely above a whisper. "What made you sign up?" I asked. "My teacher showed us shifting lines," he said. "You said truth doesn't die when it's buried. I figured maybe mine's still breathing." He told us about growing up in foster care, about learning to write rap verses on scrap paper to feel seen. When he finished, the whole room was quiet again. The kind of silence that means everyone's heart has changed shape a little. I realized then that the collective project wasn't about giving people a platform. It was about giving them permission. Shape. During editing, I kept the cuts minimal. No background score, no dramatic transitions, just raw footage stitched together by humanity. Netflix's notes were surprisingly sparse. "Too long," one exec wrote. "Too real," wrote another. Elena smirked when she read them. "That means it's perfect." The night before final delivery, we screamed the rough cut for the team. The room was dark, except for the flicker of the projector. As each story unfolded, I watched the crew instead of the screen. The tears, the laughter, the silence. When the last frame faded, no one moved. Then June whispered, "We should dedicate it to someone." Elena looked at me. "Who?" I thought for a moment. "To everyone who ever told the truth and paid for it." They nodded. No one argued. A month later, the documentary premiered globally under its official title, Voices Shared. No marketing blitz, no controversy, just a quiet drop at midnight. By morning, it was trending, not because it shocked people, but because it soothed them. Viewers posted clips of strangers' stories, writing captions like, "This is me. I thought I was alone." The comment that struck me most read, "Finally, a show that listens instead of speaking." That night, I sat on my balcony watching the city glow. My phone buzzed constantly, but I ignored it. Somewhere inside that noise was the sound of the world listening to itself. Shape. A week later, I received a small package at the studio. No note. Inside was a USB drive labeled simply for Ava. I plugged it in. The file opened to a short video montage, clips from viewers around the world reading quotes from voices shared. Teachers in classrooms, nurses in break rooms, teenagers in bedrooms lit by phone screens. At the end, a message appeared. Thank you for giving us our voices back. I covered my mouth, tears slipping through my fingers. For years, I'd chased truth like a prize. Now it felt like it belonged to everyone. Shape. Later that night, I called Liam. He answered on the second ring. I saw it, he said. Voices shared? Yeah. You did what we never managed to do. You made people feel seen. We did, I said softly. Just in different ways. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I tell my students that stories don't save us. They remind us why we're worth saving. I smiled. Stealing my lines again? Maybe. We both laughed. Before hanging up, he said, "Proud of you, Ava." This time, I didn't need to say it back. He already knew. Shape, when I went to bed, the city was quiet, breathing in rhythm with me. For the first time since that night of betrayal years ago, I didn't dream about retribution or loss. I dreamed of 100 different voices, layered and alive, speaking the same simple truth. We're still here. Shape fame came back, dressed in sincerity. 1 week after Voices Shared premiered, my inbox stopped being a place for messages and became an avalanche. Journalists from London, Paris, Tokyo. Invitations to summits, panels, think tanks. UNESCO wanted me to keynote a forum on global truth narratives. The irony nearly made me choke on my coffee. I had built a film about ordinary people speaking for themselves. Now the world wanted me to speak for them. Elena burst into my office, waving a tablet. Ava, you've gone international. 42 countries. Subtitles in 28 languages. The president of Iceland just tweeted a quote from you. I blinked. That's a sentence I never thought I'd hear. She laughed. Enjoy it. You're changing the conversation. But I wasn't sure I liked the conversation anymore. Shape. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Geneva for the Human Stories Conference. Business class, champagne I didn't touch, a seat that converted into a bed I couldn't use. I watched clouds through the oval window and wondered if anyone ever learns how to be comfortable at high altitude. The conference center was all glass and flags. Inside, posters of my face hung beside slogans about truth and unity. I'd ask them not to use my portrait. They'd done it anyway. A volunteer handed me a laminated pass that read, Ava Morgan, keynote speaker, truth in the age of noise. It felt less like an honor and more like a warning. When I stepped onto the stage, applause rolled through the hall like weather. I smiled because that's what you do. Thousands of people waited, phones raised, eyes shining with expectation. I began, steady voice, rehearsed calm. Stories are how we remember what matters. But even truth can be misused when it becomes performance. The crowd nodded, eager, approving. They heard the words, they didn't feel the doubt under them. Halfway through, a man in the front row shouted, "You're the conscience of our generation." The hall erupted in cheers. I froze for a heartbeat. The lights too bright. Conscience of our generation. That wasn't a compliment. That was a cage. I finished the talk, shook hands, smiled for cameras, signed autographs. Inside, I felt hollow. Shape that night at the hotel. My suite overlooked the lake. Mirror still, black as ink. I stood by the window, still wearing my stage makeup. The phone wouldn't stop buzzing. New requests, new praise. My name trended again. I turned off every device, sat on the carpet, and tried to breathe. When the quiet finally settled, I whispered, "This isn't what I built." But it was. I had taught the world to listen. and now it was listening too loudly. Shape the following morning, an aide from the United Nations escorted me to a round-table meeting. Representatives from multiple countries wanted to partner with the Voices Shared Initiative. Translation: they wanted ownership. A diplomat smiled across the polished table. Miss Morgan, your work has become a moral compass. With your guidance, we can institutionalize truth-telling. Institutionalize truth. The phrase sounded like a paradox wearing a suit. I said carefully, truth doesn't belong to institutions. It belongs to people. He frowned. But without structure, movements fade. Maybe that's the point. I said, movements should evolve, not ossify. Elena caught my eye, silently urging diplomacy, but my patience for politics was thin. The meeting ended politely, the kind of politeness that means nothing. Outside, reporters swarmed. Ava, will you lead a global initiative? Ava, do you see yourself as a humanitarian figure? I kept walking. I'm a filmmaker, not a prophet. They didn't quote that part later. Shape back in my hotel room, I found a message from Liam waiting in my inbox. They'll turn you into a saint if you let them. Saints don't get to make mistakes. Be careful. I smiled sadly. He was right again. I replied simply, thanks for the warning. By the time I returned to Los Angeles, the whirlwind had already reached home. Billboards, editorials, podcasts. Everyone wanted Ava Morgan's thoughts on every crisis, every controversy. A talk show producer called. Ava, we'd love you on the panel to discuss the ethics of political journalism. You're the voice of truth right now. No, I said. He laughed, assuming modesty. We'll pay whatever you want. No, I repeated. Truth doesn't have a rate card. When I hung up, I realized I was trembling, not from anger, but from fear. Not fear of them, but fear of losing myself again in applause. Shape. One night I visited the old warehouse where Voices Shared had been filmed. It was empty now, except for dust and the faint echo of stories still clinging to the walls. I sat on the floor where Rosa had once told her story and whispered, "What now?" The silence answered. I pulled out my notebook and wrote, "When people start worshiping you for telling the truth, remind them you still lie to yourself sometimes." The words steadied me. I decided then that the next project wouldn't feature me at all. No narrator, no credits, no created by. Just stories released anonymously into the world. Truth without a face. Shape. A week later, I met Elena at a small cafe near Sunset. She looked at me over her espresso. You disappeared. I needed to remember what quiet sounded like. She nodded. The offers keep coming. Let them. I'm not the story. She smiled, half proud, half worried. You realize that makes you more mysterious. People will chase you harder. Then maybe mystery is my last defense. Outside, the evening light turned the glass windows gold. I watched people hurrying by, ordinary, unseen, alive. That was the world I wanted back. Shape. When I got home, I turned off every notification, deleted the apps again, and pinned one note to my wall. Be smaller. Stay true. And next morning, for the first time in months, I woke up to silence. No alerts, no interviews, no applause. Just me, the sunlight, and the sound of Los Angeles breathing. And in that quiet, I finally understood. Truth doesn't need a spokesperson. It just needs space to echo. The road north felt endless in the best way. No deadlines, no press, no agenda, just a map, a playlist, and the hum of tires cutting through Pacific fog. I hadn't told anyone except Elena I was leaving. Just a break, I'd said. She'd smiled knowingly. You don't owe the world explanations, Ava. Go before you start apologizing for breathing. So I went. By late afternoon, Los Angeles was a blur behind me, its skyline shrinking into memory. The coast opened up. Cliffs, cypress trees, gulls riding invisible currents. I drove until the air tasted like salt instead of stress. I found the town by accident. Mariner's Reach, population 3,000, tucked between the ocean and a ridge of redwoods. One main street, a diner, a bookshop, and a weather-beaten pier that looked older than truth itself. I rented a cottage on the bluff. One bedroom, creaky floorboards, windows that moaned when the wind shifted. Perfect. The first night, I fell asleep to the sound of waves, the kind that never stopped talking. Shape days bled into each other in the most beautiful monotony. I woke early, made coffee that always tasted faintly of sea air, walked the beach before sunrise. No emails, no headlines, just gull tracks on sand and my own. At the local diner, the waitress, Mara, 60-something with laugh lines like parentheses, learned my order by the second morning. Black coffee, oatmeal, no sugar, she said, scribbling before I spoke. I nodded. How'd you guess? Writers drink like philosophers, she said, black and bitter. I laughed. She didn't ask what I wrote. No one here did. To them, I was just Ava from LA, renting the cottage on the bluff. It was the first identity that felt weightless, Shape. By the second week, I started writing again, not for Netflix, not for critics, just for me. Longhand, ink bleeding on paper, pages that might never be read. It felt like unlearning fame, one sentence at a time. Sometimes, I'd sit on the pier watching fishermen cast lines, thinking about how stories work the same way. Throw something into the deep and hope something honest bites. One afternoon, a kid of maybe 12 wandered up beside me, holding a camera that looked older than he was. You taking pictures too? He asked. Not today. He frowned. You should. The light's good right now. I smiled. Maybe you're right. He grinned, then aimed his camera at the horizon. I'm making a movie about the sea. No people, just waves. Sounds peaceful. It's supposed to be. When he ran off, I realized how much I missed that kind of innocence. The kind that creates without calculating impact. Shape, by the third week, news finally reached even here. The bar TV in town blared one evening. Ava Morgan declines all new offers, disappears from Hollywood spotlight. The locals glanced at the screen, then back to their beers. No one made the connection. Mara looked over and winked. That woman's smarter than most, knows when to leave a party. I laughed quietly into my glass. Yeah, she's learning. Shape, one morning, rain came hard and sudden. The sea vanished behind mist. Wind rattled the cottage. I lit the fireplace and sat by it, notebook open, pen hovering. I wrote a single line. Sometimes disappearing does not escape, it's maintenance. Then I wrote another and another until the fire burned low. For the first time since childhood, I wrote without imagining anyone watching. The words stopped performing and started breathing. Later that afternoon, I walked down to the beach barefoot. The rain had softened the sand, turning footprints into shallow puddles. I stood there until the water reached my ankles and whispered, "Still here." The ocean didn't answer, but it didn't need to. Shape, a month passed. One evening, Mara handed me a package at the diner. For you, no return address. Inside was a small wooden box. I opened it to find a flash drive and a note in Liam's handwriting. No headlines this time, just something I thought you'd like. I plugged it into my laptop that night. A short film loaded, grainy clips of his students presenting their final projects. They'd made mini documentaries inspired by voices shared. Each ended with the same line on screen. Told with honesty, guided by truth. The final clip showed Liam looking into the camera. We're still learning from you, Ava. Hope you're writing something new. I laughed, tears surprising me. I am, I whispered, just not the way you think. I emailed him a photo of the sea, no caption. He replied with a heart emoji an hour later. That was enough. Shape, as spring crept in, the town began to feel like part of me. Salt on my skin, sand in my shoes, quiet in my bones. The locals had stopped calling me Ava from LA and started calling me Morgan, as if the name belonged here all along. One evening, the kid with the camera came running up the beach, breathless. "I finished my movie," he said, handing me a USB stick. "It's called Tides." I watched it that night. 3 minutes of waves, light shifting from gold to silver, no dialogue, just rhythm. When it ended, I sat smiling. He'd done it. He'd captured peace. Shape that night, I wrote again. Not a script, not a story, just a truth I finally understood. Legacy isn't what the world remembers of you. It's what it keeps doing after you stop reminding it. I closed the notebook, blew out the candle, and listened to the surf whisper against the rocks. For once, I didn't feel the need to record it. Some moments are meant to live only once. Shape. The sea was calm the morning it happened. I was on the bluff with my coffee, notebook open on my lap, when the sirens broke the stillness. Thin, urgent cries swallowed by wind. 2, then 3, echoing down from the main road. I stood, heart climbing into my throat. In Mariner's Reach, sirens meant one thing, something bad enough to break the quiet. I grabbed my jacket and ran. By the time I reached the harbor, half the town was gathered near the pier. The fishing boat Luna Bell, an old wooden vessel every local knew, was listing against the dock, smoke curling from its hull. Someone shouted, "It's the Hale boys." My stomach dropped. The Hale brothers, Evan and Theo, teenagers who'd grown up hauling nets since they could walk. Mara's grandsons. The paramedics worked fast. They pulled the boys out, burned and coughing, but alive. The crowd exhaled as one, but the boat was ruined. The family's livelihood gone. Mara arrived moments later, aprons still on from the diner. She froze at the sight, her face collapsing in on itself. "Oh God," she whispered. I moved toward her, steadying her by the shoulders. "They're okay," I said. "They're alive." Her hands trembled. "That boat was all we had." I had no answer, only the smell of smoke and salt and fear. Shape. The next day, the town felt hollow. The pier was cordoned off, the diner half empty. Mara didn't open for breakfast. The Hale family's debt wasn't a secret. Everyone knew the Luna Bell wasn't insured. By evening, whispers spread. Someone started a fundraiser online, but it barely moved. Mariner's Reach didn't have influencers or millionaires, just fishermen, teachers, dreamers with more heart than money. I sat by my window, watching the sun collapse into the horizon, and felt the old tug, the pull of story. It wasn't fame calling. It was purpose. But fear followed close behind. I'd left the world of cameras for peace. Stepping back into storytelling meant attention, and attention always came with distortion. I tried to sleep. I couldn't. By midnight, I was at my desk typing. Shape. The next morning, I walked into the diner carrying a flash drive. Mara looked up, surprised. "You're open." "Couldn't stay closed," she said. "Too quiet. People worry more when it's quiet." I slid the flash drive across the counter. "It's something I made." She squinted. "A movie?" "A story," I said. "About the Hales, about this town." I used footage from the beach, from the harbor, nothing fancy. Just truth. She frowned. "You filmed us?" I shook my head. "Not this time. I recorded the sound, the sea, the gulls, the wind. Then I told your story, you and the boys. The strength of people who fix what the tide takes." She was silent. "I want to post it," I said. "Not under my name. Anonymous. Let the world hear you, not me." Her eyes filled. "Will it help?" "I don't know," I admitted. But stories always do something. Shape, we uploaded it that afternoon. I titled it simply Mariner's Reach. The video was 2 minutes long. My voice narrated softly over waves and wind. Some towns don't make headlines. They make people. When loss comes, they hold each other until it passes through. This is Mariner's Reach. The sea takes, but it also teaches. Mara's laughter from an old diner recording played under the words. We posted it to a community forum. I expected maybe a few hundred views. By morning, it had hundreds of thousands. Then, millions. People donated. Not just money, supplies, fishing gear, school funds. Messages flooded in. Your town reminds me of home. This gave me faith in people again. News outlets picked it up. For the first time, a story of mine went viral, not because of pain, but because of hope. Shape, Mara called me 3 days later, crying through laughter. Ava, they rebuilt the boat. They're naming the new one the Morgantide. I covered my mouth, tears rising. They shouldn't. They should, she said firmly. You gave this place back its voice. I didn't know what to say. The sea answered for me. Waves pounding in applause below the bluff. Shape. That evening, I walked down to the pier. The sun was setting, bleeding orange over the horizon. The rebuilt hull gleamed in the last light, still wet with paint. The boys waved from the deck, grinning. Theo shouted, You're famous again, Miss Morgan. I smiled. Not this time, because this wasn't about me. My name wasn't anywhere on the video. The world didn't need to know who told the story. They just needed to hear it. Later that night, I sat on the porch with my notebook. The sea was calm again, as if nothing had happened, but everything had changed. I wrote, When truth belongs to everyone, it can't be corrupted. Maybe that's what freedom really is. Not silence, but shared sound. I closed the notebook, set it beside me, and watched the stars emerge one by one. My phone buzzed once. A message from Elena. You did it again, didn't you? I smiled, typing back, Not me, we. Shape weeks later, when the town held its summer fair, the new boat bobbed in the harbor. Its name painted bright across the bow, the Morgantide. Mara made me stand beside her for the ribbon cutting. You're part of us now, she said, handing me the scissors. The crowd clapped as the ribbon fell and the boat eased into the water. I thought of all the years I'd chased meaning through fame, justice, forgiveness. But here, surrounded by laughter and salt air, meaning had found me, small, unglamorous, permanent. I whispered to the sea, Thank you. It answered in waves. Summer in Mariner's Reach smells like oranges and salt. The air hums with small, beautiful sounds, waves slapping against wood, gulls calling, laughter spilling from the diner where Mara insists on feeding everyone twice what they can eat. Tourists drift through on weekends, drawn by the viral story of the town that rebuilt itself. Most don't realize the storyteller lives in a cottage a mile down the road, writing with the windows open. I like it that way. The Morgantide sails at dawn now. I wake early enough to see it glide out of the harbor, the Hale brothers waving as they pass the bluff. Their laughter reaches me faintly through the wind. It's become my morning soundtrack, proof that something broken can float again. I keep the notebook close, but these days I write less about wounds and more about weather, food, and faces. I write what I see. Mara scolding the gulls for stealing fries. Jordan, the teenage filmmaker, teaching kids how to use his camera. The ocean breathing in and out like a living thing. There's no plot, no audience, just life, unedited. Shape one afternoon. Elena drove up from Los Angeles. She arrived in her usual storm, heels clicking, sunglasses flashing, phone buzzing with unanswered calls. This place is smaller than I imagined, she said, stepping into the cottage. You really traded streaming deals for seashells? Worth it, I said, handing her coffee. She smiled. You're trending again. I groaned. What now? Someone found out you live here. They're calling it the Retreat of Truth. I rolled my eyes. I swear people could turn breathing into a brand. She laughed. You could sue them. Or, I said, I could let them think peace is marketable if it keeps them quiet. She studied me for a moment, then softened. You look happy, Ava. Real happy. I am, I admitted. I think I finally built a life that doesn't collapse when no one's watching. We walked down to the beach. The tide was low, and the sand shimmered in the late light. Elena took off her shoes and waded into the surf. "I get it now," she said. "This isn't running away. It's staying still long enough to hear yourself think." I smiled. Welcome to the club. Shape. A few nights later, the town hosted a film screening on the pier. Jordan's idea. He'd set up a projector against the side of the Morgan tide, inviting everyone to bring blankets and sit on the dock. The first short film played just after sunset, a montage of local life, fishermen, kids chasing kites, Mara wiping down the diner counter. It ended with a shot of the ocean at dawn and the words, directed by Jordan Hale, inspired by the people of Mariner's Reach. Applause rolled across the water like thunder softened by love. Mara leaned over to me. "He's got your gift." I shook my head. "He's got his own." But watching him beam under that golden light, I knew she was partly right. Storytelling had become contagious here, spreading like salt air through open doors. That night, after the crowd dispersed, Jordan approached me, nervous and proud. "You think I should keep going? Make something bigger?" "Yes," I said, "but not for fame, for memory." "So people remember what small things feel like." He grinned. "You sound like a quote." I laughed. "Then don't write it down." Shape. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail with a New York postmark. "Dear Ava, they invited me to speak at a festival about ethical storytelling. I said yes, but only if I could bring some of my students. We're calling our panel Voices Shared. You started this without meaning to. I just wanted you to know the echo reached us." I read it twice, smiling. He'd found his redemption too. Maybe that was the real end of our story. Not forgiveness, but continuation. Shape. Autumn crept in gently. The air sharpened. The sea darkened. I found new rhythms. Writing in the mornings, helping at the diner when Mara needed extra hands, teaching Jordan's film class once a week at the community center. On the final day of class, he asked, "What's the most important rule for storytelling?" I thought for a long moment. "Listen, then get out of the way." He nodded like he understood. Maybe he already did. Shape. That night, I walked the beach alone. The sky stretched wide and violet. The moon caught on the rim of the water. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to narrate the moment. There was nothing left to explain, nothing to prove, just the soft weight of peace settling over everything. I knelt, pressed my hand to the sand, and whispered, "Thank you." The tide came in, erased my print, and whispered back. Maybe that's how stories end. Not with applause, not with closure, but with acceptance. The sea takes your words and folds them into something larger. Shape. Before going inside, I turned toward the town, lights flickering like constellations scattered across Earth. Somewhere the Hale brothers were mending nets. Mara was locking the diner, and Jordan was probably editing his next film. The world didn't need another Ava Morgan headline. It just needed more people telling the truth in small, brave ways. I smiled, letting the wind sting my cheeks. "Keep going," I said to no one in particular. Then I went inside, closed the door, and for the first time in my life, didn't feel like the story was ending. It was simply living. 5 years later, the sea still sounds the same. I'm older now, not old, just older in the way that quiet ages you. Softly, evenly, like salt polishing stone. The cottage hasn't changed much, except for the ivy creeping across the porch, and the stack of notebooks that keeps growing by the window. Each one is filled with stories that belong to other people, written in my hand. I call them borrowed voices. Maybe someday someone will find them and think I was writing about myself. Maybe that's the point. The world never fully stopped knocking. Letters still arrive. Students asking advice. Journalists requesting interviews. Producers dangling impossible offers. I answer the students. I ignore the rest. The world moves fast. I learned to move slow. Morris still runs the diner. Jordan's documentaries win small-town awards that mean more than trophies ever could. The Morgantide sails at sunrise each morning, nets full, laughter louder than the gulls. Sometimes I help patch the nets, pretending I know what I'm doing until the boys roll their eyes and fix my work. At night, the town gathers by bonfire light to tell stories. No cameras, no scripts. Just memory passing from mouth to mouth like a flame that never burns out. I listen more than I speak. When they ask for one of mine, I tell them a short version. The story of a woman who lost everything trying to be heard, then found everything when she started listening. They always smile, not realizing it's not fiction. Shape. One autumn morning, a letter came with an international postmark. The handwriting made me pause. Dear Ava, our students just completed their first international exchange project. We called it Shared Worlds. They asked who started it. I showed them an old clip from Framed Truths, the first one. They gasped at how young we were. I told them you taught me that stories are only dangerous when we forget they belong to everyone. I'm coming west next spring. Maybe we can finally go fishing instead of fighting. I laughed out loud, folded the letter, and tucked it between the pages of my latest notebook. I didn't need to write him back. He'd find me. He always did. Shape winter rolled in early that year. Storms pounded the coast, rattling windows, carving new scars into the cliffs. One night, the power went out. I lit candles, wrapped myself in a blanket, and listened to the wind scream like an unfinished song. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one standing in that office years ago while her brother took credit for her work. I wanted to tell her she was right to stay calm, that her silence wasn't weakness, it was the pause before power. If I could reach across time, I'd whisper, "You'll get your voice back, but it won't sound the same. It'll sound softer, stronger." The storm eased just before dawn. I stepped outside barefoot, the sky streaked with pink and silver. The sea looked bruised but alive. That's when I realized I'd spent my whole life trying to win against the tide, when all I ever needed was to move with it. Shaped by spring, the letter's promise came true. Liam arrived one afternoon, gray at the temples, sunburned from travel, carrying 2 fishing rods. He waved like no time had passed. "You finally made it," I said. "Only took me a decade." We walked down to the pier without saying much. Words weren't necessary anymore. We cast our lines into the glittering water and waited. The silence between us felt full, not empty. After a while, he said, "You ever think about filming again?" "Every day," I said. "I just don't think about showing it." He nodded. "That's fair." We caught nothing, but we stayed until sunset anyway. When we walked back up the bluff, he turned and looked at the horizon. "You did good, Ava." "So did you." He smiled. "Guess the story finally has an ending." I shook my head. Stories like ours don't end. They echo. Shape. That night, I sat by the window writing my last line for the day. Outside, the lantern on the pier flickered, steady despite the wind. Maybe the point was never to be famous. Maybe the point was to become whole, and to leave enough light behind for others to find their way. I closed the notebook, blew out the candle, and listened to the sea breathing below. The tide came in, the tide went out. The world kept telling stories, and I, finally, was content to be just one of them.